Boy, oh boy, from healthcare to the latest on the travel ban and maybe another change coming to the U.S. Supreme Court. There's a lot to talk about today in politics. I'm happy to have Professor Stephen Gilles from the Quinnipiac University School of Law joining me now. He clerked for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. The man knows his stuff. And boy, 15 minutes we could probably just talk about the travel ban alone. But let's start with that, because I think for a layperson like myself who doesn't know a lot about how these work, I'm still confused as to what happened. Usually, I feel like the Supreme Court either upholds a lower court ruling, rejects it, and changes how the Constitution is interpreted, or just declines to hear the case. But this is not really one of any of those three. They said we're going to hear it later, but then still sort of made a ruling. So is this common? How do you interpret what they did?
That's because this case is all what's called preliminary.
Okay.
So even the lower courts did not say the president's order is actually flatly illegal or unconstitutional. What they said is, we think probably it is, so for now we're going to ban it, stop it, enjoin it, so it can't go into effect. The Supreme Court did not rule on the merits, period.
Yeah.
The standard that they use when they're deciding whether or not to lift a lower court's order, which they did in large part, does require them to look a little bit at the merits, but it doesn't require them to tell us anything about what they concluded, and they didn't. All they said was, this ban can go into effect as applied to people who basically have no solid family ties with the United States or no solid business ties with the United States. As to those who do have ties like that, the ban cannot go into effect, not because it's illegal, but because they haven't ruled yet on what the lower courts did.
Based on what you just told me, though, there does seem to be some constitutional backing for them to try to uphold that when they do take up the case later on. You were showing me something a little bit beforehand.
Well, I think that the president has a plausible argument that what he did not violate the Establishment Clause. And that what the court's ruling is consistent with them thinking that's probably right, but we're not sure. In the meantime, there's a lot of hardship, even if it's temporary, to families who are separated, where one family member is here in the States and another one is in Somalia.
Right.
So let's hold off on actually enforcing the ban until we rule. But the next question, right, is, are they ever going to get to a ruling?
Yeah, and that may not happen. But should they get to the point where they are going to rule, at least at this point, we know that you were saying the president will have probably 3 justices in his corner because they dissented against this opinion, wanting to see the whole travel ban enforced.
Yes, they not only did they dissent, they put a sentence in that said, when the court has ruled as it has today, usually what that means is we think that the government's going to win in the end when we rule on the merits. So the 3 of them are telling us they think at least 2 of the other 6 are going to agree with them that on balance what the president did is constitutional. I should just add quickly, though, that there's also a challenge under federal immigration law to what the president did. And in fact, that's the basis on which one of the courts below, the Ninth Circuit, ruled. The Ninth Circuit didn't touch the Constitution. They said it violates federal immigration law, so that's lurking in the case as well.
Is there anything to be taken from the fact that, at least preliminarily, they didn't appear to look at what the president had been saying on Twitter and during campaign speeches? Any sort of rhetoric or policy talk didn't come into play here?
That's right, but the court made no references to that other than to say that the lower court, one of the lower courts, did look at that.
Okay.
There is prior Supreme Court case law that pretty clearly suggests that, no, you don't look at presidential statements on the campaign trail. But this is the Supreme Court. They could say, as the court below did, this is a special case.
Okay, we only have about a minute or so to go. Of course, tied into this is, hey, what could the Supreme Court look like if they ever decide to take up the case? We have Justice Anthony Kennedy. Is he going to retire? Is he not? When would we sort of pass the drop-dead point where we could be certain he's not going to retire, given that he hasn't made an announcement yet?
Never. I mean, it's up to him to decide when he wants to retire. Justice O'Connor retired in the middle of July.
Okay.
And she told the president in her letter, I'll resign effective when my successor is confirmed. It would be very interesting if Kennedy did that, because there would obviously be a huge confirmation fight, and that would mean he'd stay on the court until and unless someone else took his place.
Now, he was the swing vote, more or less.
That's right.
Would the swing vote then go to what, if there is one, to Chief Justice Roberts?
That's correct.
Okay.
In my view, I mean, you can, on balance of the Alito, Gorsuch, Thomas are all, I think, somewhat more solidly, reliably conservative than the Chief Justice. And so assuming, and President Trump's unpredictable, but assuming he tried to put another solid conservative on the court, I think that's right. Roberts would become the swing vote.
Okay. Well, I think that could be a safe assumption. Not that we're in the business of assuming, but at this point, when all you can do is speculate going forward, it's interesting to think about the ramifications. We should have you back because there's so much to try to get into, and we've run out of time. But, Professor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
You learn a lot in 4 minutes. That's how TV can work sometimes when it's at its best. Well, still ahead on Good Day Connecticut here on Fox 61. We're going to talk more about